What's up, everybody? Paul here from the Hoops Crew, and it is a 1-2 scoreline for the Cats so far this year. We've gone down to the Brisbane Lions in our round 3 opening round rematch, or redux, really, to the tune of 9 points. A fairly disappointing result in the end, despite a very, very strong first half. And we'll talk about some of these momentum halting or the inability to halt momentum and a whole lot more in this video today, this reaction video. But first, the final scores. Brisbane 10-10-70 beat the Cats 9-7-61, where we led at one point by as much as 32 points and completely blew it. As Chris Scott highlights here, just there's this little snippet from his press conference. He says the Cats will rue the lost opportunity. They let a win get away as far as I'm concerned. And again, I think a lot of this goes back to this conversation about Geelong's inability across 3 games so far, every match we've played this season, to halt the momentum of an opposition team. It's getting increasingly concerning and really disappointing that we've really kind of coughed up 2 wins so far and certainly let Fremantle back in round 1 due to just the inability to kind of squash a team when they get momentum, to control the ball, to get possession. And there's a big conversation I think needs to be had here. But before we get to all of that, let's take a word from our sponsor.
The Hoops Crew Media Network is proudly sponsored by Cyril Cook Florist. Visit them at shop 1211 Leather Street in Breakwater. Phone them on 035 222 2244 or visit their website at www.cyrilcookflorist.com.au and use the offer code GOCATS in the voucher field at checkout to get 20% off your next online purchase.
Thank you, Cyril Cook Florist, as always, for your ongoing support of the Hoops Crew and all that we do. Now, let's look at the worm here, because it paints the tale that I alluded to before. We led by as much as 32 points following this Brad Close goal late in the second quarter. They did get one back late in the piece there with Will Ashcroft getting one, which was a fantastic effort on his part. And then there was just this procession. And you can see, like, we had 7 goals, 6 to half time. We finished 9 goals, 7. We had 3 scoring shots in an entire half of football. We just could not get the ball inside 50. And I've spoken about this. We mentioned it last week with St Kilda. We spoke about it when it came to the third quarter against the Dockers as well. Geelong is not playing a full 4 quarters, and they are not finding the capacity within themselves to shut down a team when they get momentum. And football has this. Teams get on fire at points. They get their hands on the ball. Everything's just clicking. They start humming at different stages, especially some of the higher quality teams. It's going to happen. But Geelong seems to be incapable of shutting it down until there's been a change of quarter. And it's not okay. It keeps happening. It's a real problem, and it needs to be talked about more. And I haven't checked out the Chris Scott press conference. I know he alludes to ruining lost opportunities. I don't know if he speaks about that in detail. I will check it out sometime after I record this video. But it's a real pattern of behavior, and we just can't seem to course correct it at the moment. Now, we did lose Tom Stewart pre-game. I think most people believed he probably wasn't going to quite get up in the end. Chris Scott seems relatively confident, though, that he was super close this week and that he'll be okay for next week against the D's, which is great news, considering how significant that injury against the Saints looked for a while there. But Tom Stewart not playing is not the reason why we lost this game. The reason we lost this game was this third quarter. You can see even a few behinds early on, like Brisbane peppered away at various different stages, and they just piled the goals on. One of the things that I noticed, and I think probably everyone noticed, was in the first half, our pressure was high. In fact, to be fair, even through the third quarter when Brisbane were on top, our pressure was still high, but we allowed them to clear the ball a little bit easier. They managed to spread a bit easier and lace out some uncontested possessions. And the real obvious shift in the team stats over the course of the game, specifically in the second half, was the uncontested marks count. Where is it? We've got just the regulation marks, the uncontested possessions. In the first half, it was a mess for Brisbane, but in the second, now we've only got match totals here, but in the second half, the whole script flipped. They were hitting their targets. They were very smart about the choices they made, and they also started to do, and it was Bruce Revel, who was, I think, playing perhaps his first game. Yeah, it was his first game actually. Yeah, because his first kick set up, was a goal assist. His second kick was a goal. But he was one of the ones that I noticed the most because he was crossing the ball like he wasn't keeping to a lane. He was swinging it across the body and lacing people out, which was what Geelong was doing so well in the first half. We just put that side of our game away, and it really only brought it out kind of again late in the piece when the chips were down and we had to win, and it was too late. The damage was already done. You can see across the board here with pretty much all of the stats, everything favours Brisbane. It's because we were so heavily dominated in that second half. It's not because of the first half in any way, shape or form. We really kind of dominated that first half, but we just let it all slip in the second half. Where we were significantly better in the first, they were even better again than we were in the second half, and that led to the 9-point win that they got. I don't make anything too much of the free kicks. Outside of, and I commented on this, I think in maybe the Paul James show, an episode recently where I was talking about the Collingwood match and Nick Dacos walking over the boundary line. We need to be taking a good look at this. There are players who are quite frequently putting up this ruse that they are trying to keep the ball in play, but then they're kind of swinging, but then they turn to the right, for example, and they just trot over the boundary line because they just didn't realize that they ran out of space. Bullshit. And Brisbane pulled that quite a lot at different stages of the game. But I would also argue at different points, Geelong were doing a lot of slap-on plays, especially in the first half. We were doing a lot of slap-on plays that we knew the ball wasn't going to stay in, but we added an extra 10 metres ground at that point. So there's pros and cons both sides, but I do think this walking the ball over the boundary line thing is becoming a recurring issue. We've seen it across multiple games involving multiple teams this season, and it's got to stop. It's really obvious to anyone watching on the TV, and probably live as well. The umpires simply aren't picking it up for whatever reason, or they're not prioritising it. And I think we need to clamp that down. The goal is to keep the ball in play. We know that in a wet game like we had last night, the ball will find its way out of play more often than usual. That puts more heat, in my mind, on the players to actually try to keep the ball in play. Not this, I've got possession, I swung, oh no, hang on, sorry, I've just gone over the boundary line. Here you go, boundary umpire. Wasn't my plan. Of course it was, dickhead. So I'm not crazy about that part of the game at the moment. Again, it's not just the Geelong and Brisbane game. It's a bit of a plague that I feel like I'm noticing across many games at the moment, and it needs to be dealt with. The hit-out count, Darcy Fort did a great job against Sam de Koning. Mark Blitzarve started to get on top late in the piece when Darcy Fort went forward, and Sam obviously got subbed. Clearance numbers, again, everything was so heavily favoured Geelong, and then a massive shift late in the piece. Not great. Possession matches everything else. We just couldn't get our hands on the ball again when it counted. And this goes back to my point about momentum. We cannot seem to flick the necessary switches midway through a quarter or part of the way through a quarter to curb the momentum of an opposition team. Momentum is a thing. It's fine. It makes sense. Teams get on fire at times. And sometimes it can be really hard to squash that. And Brisbane is the reigning premier. So if there's a team that could do it better potentially than anyone else, it's them. But Geelong has demonstrated this now across 3 games this season. The third quarter against the Dockers, the whole first half really against the Saints, maybe even the first 2.5 quarters really. And then the second half, or at least a quarter and a bit against Brisbane, where we just couldn't halt that momentum at all. And it's brought us unstuck now twice, and nearly on a third occasion as well. We need to really look at it. I think our structures are still good, but I think there's a reluctance to flip the magnets around and circuit break these scenarios that we really, really need to fix up. Anyway, they're the team stats. Let's jump into some player stats. We'll focus on some individual figures. The Cats did a fantastic job. I think I have to scroll a fair way down the list to find him. Did a fairly good job of squashing Lachie Neale. He still got 20 disposals, but they were largely ineffective in the first half. He worked into the game a little bit when we dropped the tag or swapped the tag over. Don't think that was a great decision. And I think that led him in the game, which then helped let Brisbane back into the game. Poor coaching decision there as far as I'm concerned. But really, like, the other Brisbane players stepped up and we just couldn't get our hands on the ball. Max Holmes led the way for the Cats with 29. Bailey Smith got 25, but I don't think it was a very good 25. And I'm not I am factoring in the conditions, of course. Disposal efficiency was down across the board from both teams, but I don't think it was a super handy 25. Grime Myers popped up in some really important places, but again, I think it was a little bit down despite getting the ball 22 times. It was good to see Jack Bowes getting his hands on it. Some really important clearances at different stages, not just center clearances or other ball ups, but pushing through contests. Tapping the ball out, handballing the ball out. I think this was a good step back in the right direction for Jack Bowes after a lean couple of weeks to begin the season. Lawson Humphreys was great. A couple turnovers, uncharacteristic turnovers that I don't think were from a result of the weather. Just I think a couple of poor decisions or overly ambitious decisions that kind of led to a few turnovers. Zach Guthrie, if it hadn't been for Zach Guthrie, we would have lost by maybe 4 or 5 goals in the end. He was fantastic for the Cats, halting several awesome thrusts forward from Brisbane, and he was equally up to the task with some really handy just kind of scenarios where he held his ground or went back with the flight, stuck out a hand and pulled the ball in. He was fantastic. But you can just see players just weren't getting their hands on the ball. Danger was strong for us, did what he needed to do, really combative, went off after a pretty ugly head clash there, blood streaming from his face, did a great job. Oisin Mullen, possibly his best game for the Cats, certainly right up there if it wasn't his best game for the Cats, and showed a lot of poise in some really tough scenarios at different stages. Quite happy with that game. I know there's been a lot of concerns and question marks, and I've raised them too, about Oisin Mullen over the course of this season, but that was a really nice step in the right direction. And if you can continue to build on that sort of form, I think a lot of those concerns and questions about whether he should be in the team start to go away. So, Oisin, hopefully you keep that up. It was a fantastic game from you. Tom Atkins did an exceptional job in squashing Lachie Neale early. And then, for whatever reason, we seemed to drop that tag, probably to target some of the other mids who are also accumulating a lot of the ball. But I let Lachie back in, and it wasn't great. From there, the numbers start to really drop off. There's not a lot to see here. We just aren't getting our hands on the ball. This goes back to my point before. These numbers are perfectly fine if, maybe 3/4 of the way through, halftime, something like that. And I'm obviously excluding the likes of, Mark O'Connor, Jack Henry here, who play defensive roles and aren't necessarily there to accumulate the ball. But your Mark Blitzards, your Jai Clarks, your Ted Closies, we needed more. Anyway, those are... let's ignore Mitch Nevitt, obviously, who came on late. Shannon Neale, and Jeremy Cameron, actually pretty poor performance from both players. Shannon Neale had a little ankle scare early on. I think it was an ankle. And you could tell he just wasn't the same ever since, but was well and truly outplayed by the combination of Leicester, I'm going blank on everyone's names, Harris Andrews and Jack Payne in particular. Jack Payne really got a hold of him. Jeremy Cameron just couldn't find the ball at points for the most part, but was just kind of a bit ineffective in a range of other ways as well. It was a bit of a disappointing effort from our forward line unit in this particular game after starting pretty strong. All right, that is where we're going to leave it. The Cats, as I mentioned before, 10-10-70 Brisbane, went down to those lines, 9-7-61 the Cats. A really disappointing result. Hopefully one that we can quickly rectify with a hopefully thumping win against a weakened Demons outfit on Friday night. But Chris Scott says it himself, we're going to rue this lost opportunity. We're trying to start the season with a nice, strong ledger against some really difficult teams, and we're not starting the way we would like. We need to address these slumps, these momentum swings in the match better than what we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think about this Geelong and Brisbane matchup and Geelong's woes halting momentum. I'd be keen to hear what you thought, as well as some of the players on field for the game. That's where we'll wrap things up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up so you can check out more that we're doing. And of course, visit our Patreon. You can sign up for 7 days and get 7 days of free trial access before committing $5 or $6 a month to check out what we're up to on an ongoing basis. All of our content delivered directly to your email inbox. That is exclusive content, early access content, and extended content as well. You can find me at Paul James Games on socials, The Hoops Crew, at The Hoops Crew. And until next time, remain Geelong strong. Thank you very much for watching. Let's get a win next week and go 2-2. I'll see you later.